Hello there. I'm autistic, and this is a case of autism. And I'm going to hack the mainframe and get past the firewalls and... Yeah. I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, but this video is going to be pretty unique, as all of the previous examples I've done in this series have all been speculation, you know, headcanoning and all that, and then also Jacksepticeye for some reason. But this one is different in the fact that there's really no speculation to be had. This guy just is canonically autistic. Not only is he autistic, but it is a very important aspect of his character. So it's just blatantly addressed. And that is Josh... How do you pronounce his last name? Sauchak. Looks familiar. So yeah, this is just a guy from a video game that is just blatantly autistic. So I'm kind of left in this unique position where instead of trying to figure out, like, can I prove if he is or not, because I kind of don't have to. Instead, I'm going to be tackling it from the angle of, well, does this guy represent it properly? This is a character I've been wanting to tackle for a while now, because, I mean, why wouldn't I? There's just no headache involved. I just, like, look at him and go, oh, okay. There's just one problem. For most of those other examples that I've tackled, I was extremely familiar with the character to where I could speak on my own behalf. Enough. And this is going to be the first case where I'm soloing and don't fully know exactly the character. I have unfortunately not played Watch Dogs, any Watch Dogs game at all, so I am kind of going in this completely blind. Not to say I didn't do my research, but it is definitely from the perspective of an outsider, more or less. However, what made my job so much fucking easier is someone actually kind of beat me to the punch already. So, Limus. If you're unfamiliar, you may have seen their name going around as that one person who made the video talking about why Has-Been Hotel's depiction of SA victims is actually, like, kind of not cool. I am not here to talk about that, but that's probably what they're best known for, at this point at least. Sometime afterwards, they made a video, and it is titled Autism in Video Games. And they just pretty much just go off talking about different characters from video games and why they are, in their eyes, autistic. And I gotta say, it's a pretty good video. But what made things very convenient for me is that the very first character they talk about, and the one they spend the most amount of time on, is this particular character of Josh. So I kind of took notes from their explanation of the character, because as someone who is autistic and has played the games, is a huge fan of them, I take their word, like, very highly. So just complete transparency, not all, but a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is derived from that video. So if you have not watched it, I would highly recommend it, because it is baller content. Literally the only franchise I have any, like, comprehension over is, like, Ace Attorney. And yeah, I could see it. So, who is this supposed Josh character? To my understanding, he is a core character in the game's narrative and is a very important member of DedSec, which is the hacktivist group of that game, that being Watch Dogs 2, I believe. He's labeled as a hacktivist or gray hat hacker. I'm just reading the wiki at this point, bruh. Basically, their whole shtick is that they were discriminated against because of their autism by not receiving the benefits that they deserve, if I understand it correctly, and has turned to hacktivism as a means to, I guess, out of desperation. Maybe it makes more sense in gameplay, but, like, that's essentially what it is, as far as I can tell. There might be more details to that. For the purposes of this discussion, that's really all that's necessary. So off the bat, like, the fact that he is autistic is a very important aspect of his character because it serves the overall narrative that is Watch Dogs, in that the very certain subsects of people in which this universe's big tech corporation stuff, or government, I'm not entirely sure, tends to take advantage of the little guys, which does reflect real life as well. There are endless examples of those who are, like, disabled, whether physically or mentally, where they pretty much just get discriminated against because, like, oh, you're not fucking stupid, you don't need these benefits, like that kind of shit. So overall, like, an interesting type of character to pull from to push that point across in the narrative. As far as Josh himself, there are some interesting aspects about him that I find fascinating. So it's very clear to me that Josh is the type of person that kind of acts standoffish at first, but then, like, as he gets to know you and learns to trust you, like, he opens up a lot more. Yeah, it feels pretty accurate. You know, masking is, like, a very big thing, and you really don't know how to, like, feel about someone unless you, like, really know who they are and know that you can just be yourself around them. For me personally, I never really was good at that growing up, so I was just, like, myself, or I was just completely shut off entirely. But that's just me. I know for a lot of other people, it was not that simple. There are also instances in which he get carried away by his emotions and can be comforted by his friends to keep him in check. Basically, from it turning into like more of a meltdown than it could be otherwise. Yeah. Emotional regulation is definitely a huge struggle for a lot of autistic individuals, and that definitely checks out. The way that it's handled is, like, interesting too, because it's like with the example that Limas showed, it seemed like he was upset because there was a mistake that he did not check for, but he was able to catch it before anyone else did, which they pointed out, which helped calm him down, which was really sweet to see. Like, that was really nice. Something that I find interesting is, like, even during, like, exacerbations like that, there's a clear focus for the voice direction of the character to keep him, like, pretty monotone most of the time, which, like, yeah, I feel like I fall into this too sometimes, where I just don't really have much tone behind what I'm saying, even though, like, what I'm saying is, like, you know, obviously, like, kind of, like, you know, oh, that's cool, like it's not that I don't feel a certain way, it's just I don't, like, project it all that much. Like, it's a very common sort of issue, so, like, that does not surprise me that that's, like, a thing with him. One thing that is interesting is that he has a very unique sense of humor. There was again, going back to that video, an example of him finding a unique form of entertainment out of the word cornhole.
The cornholing begin. You heard the man.
And just the general over-analysis of social constructs. Yeah, whenever it comes down to an individual finding humor in stuff, I don't even think it's necessarily specifically an autistic thing, but I think it's, like, very prevalent for people who are, like, social outcasts in general, in which they just find ways to be funny or find entertainment in stuff. Would you believe it or not? Like, there was a time where I was not funny. I know. Embarrassing. You think this wit's natural? Like, nah. And also just, like, the general idea of finding things outlandish that other people take for granted. Like, yeah, overanalyzation is a very common thing, at least for me and the people I've encountered. I guess that leads to that whole thinking outside the box kind of behavior that a lot are seen to exhibit, which, sure, I guess that's one way to describe it, I suppose. One thing that I found very interesting about him, personally, is he apparently seems to have a fan favorite scene in the game where there's this person who they're trying to work with in order to acquire something. I can't comprehend what the hell they're talking about. So, they need to get, like, some sort of data or some information or something. And it's very clear that this individual that they're working with is, like, whether or not it's, like, genuine attraction or it's used for manipulation purposes, I'm not aware of. But they seem to be trying to hit on Josh. And they feel like that they could just, like, walk over him because he acts very, like, socially inept. about the whole thing, and that's probably true. He's like very visually like obviously uncomfortable about the interactions. But as it turns out, as it seemed like they were going to like get away with the stuff that they need, he was able to scan the info so that they have it too. And upon that realization, by one of his friends and allies in his hacktivist group, this is his response.
You straight played her!
Don't fuck with the hot sauce.
It reeks of, how do I put this, catchphrase farming. I don't know how else to put it, but I'm not gonna lie, that goes pretty fucking hard. So I'm willing to give it a pass. That's pretty freaking cool. Like taking this character and using him in a way that makes him like very, not only just competent, but like being capable of using what is appeared to be as a weakness as an advantage. God, how would I describe this? I guess like just acting undercover as himself. It's so weird to say, but it's clear he plays along with these expectations of him in order to get what he wants, which I cannot say that I relate to, but is not unbelievable. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I think it's just stuff like that proved to me that they try to make him like a character as opposed to just like some guy that has like autism and is just a part of the group. Clearly he has a lot of relevance to the plot, but he's also like actively doing stuff to help move the plot along and also like contribute in a major way in multiple areas. That's something that I like to see. Not just like, oh yeah, he's just some guy and he just has autism or whatever. So overall, my general consensus is that the way that Josh is depicted in this game is pretty good. They pretty much just tackled the character as best as they could. But that's the thing. Josh is what I would like to call the best case scenario of mainstream culture tackling the topic without actually having any knowledge on it. Now, I want to be very clear when I say this. It is very apparent to me that the writers, animators, like all the devs involved, all the people involved in actually making the game, all of them did their research. And they pretty much did as much justice to the character as they possibly could. But there are some things that I have opinions about with this character that I really feel like is important to address. So, first off, and it really needs to be said, and if you know me, you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. He's another fucking savant, dude! Like, okay, like, sure, you can make the argument of, like, he's not literally, like, a savant kind of guy, but, like, he's literally the guy in the chair. He's described as being, like, the best at hacking and coding in their group. He is just the most competent at some of the most complicated stuff that they need. And sure, again, as I've said before, that puts a lot of importance on him, and that's really cool and all, but my God, I'm just sick and tired of just, like, any example that I can think of, they just always end up being, like, the smartest guy in the room. Alright? Stop making autistic people savants! I'm tired of seeing it! On top of that, he's also very competent at drone building. So not only is he good from, like, a coding side, but he's also good on a manufacturing side as well, or I guess physical construction. I don't know if he's able, if it's like building like drones in the sense of like programming them, or just like if he actually like makes them from hand. Because I know there is another character who is like more of the designated robotics guy, but like, why not just make him like a multi-purpose genius? What could you possibly insinuate with that? Look, I'm not saying that you can't make him good at that shit, but to make him literally the best out of all of them is like, okay, but like, it's a whole thing. I've gone on about it before. I'm not gonna waste my or your time again about this shit. The only other aspect that I think is worth addressing, and this is very subjective, so don't really take my word about it, but like, I'm gonna be real, man. This is the most, how do I put this? Hollywood-centric, we have an autistic character kind of character we have. Because, like, I don't know what it is when it comes to depicting autistic characters, but whenever, like, someone is made out to be autistic, it feels like that intention is done first, and then the attempts at representation come afterwards, and that can be fine. Like, you can intend to have like a specific type of character in your work, but it's also kind of like, can you know, make it not so forced? Like, here's my thing that makes it complicated for me about Josh specifically. It's very obvious that his autism is integral to the plot, because it's specifically because of that he finds himself in DedSec to begin with. And to their credit, they're not doing an incorrect portrayal of an example of someone with that specific disability. My thing is just like, outside of like actually bad examples, and I guess like even including some, this is the only type of autism that really gets explored. I'm very open about my own, obviously. It's kind of hard not to be. But the thing when it comes to Josh is that, like, it feels like it is a main component as to his character's identity. Or not even just his identity, because, like, obviously, like, that's important, again, for plot reasons. But, like, it feels like, from what I have observed, it is a core tenet of just the character. And it influences a lot. How do I put this without sounding close-minded? I guess just like, there isn't really a single thing I can think about Josh that could potentially not be traced back to his autism. Like, oh, he's really good at coding because he's autistic. Oh, like, he's very monotone because he's autistic. Oh, like, he has a hard time sitting still because he's autistic. And yeah, the character does, like, try to subvert, like, some expectations, again, with that don't fuck with hot sauce bit. But at the same time, it feels very closed off and doesn't really give him much to be a character outside of his autism. Maybe there's just something I missed, but it doesn't really feel like there's much about him outside of that. Like, I don't know, like, it's really hard for me to, like, come up with examples on, like, what else you could have done. I myself am not a writer, so it would be kind of difficult. But that's just kind of the perception that I get from him. And it really sucks, because there are, like, ways in which you can subtly, or at least more subtly, have a character, have them be autistic, and not be, like, their defining trait. As with the multiple examples I've had, like, for Nimona, for example, her whole thing, like, being obsessed over, like, battling all the time is interesting, but, like, it's not, like, the only thing that makes up her character. She's just, like, a bubbly, extroverted, outgoing person who also has, like, an identity crisis when it comes to, like, making friends and stuff, as she's expressed near the end of her story, her arc, I don't know what you call it. Like, it's very clearly she is, like, a person. And not to say Josh isn't. It's just that there are just things about Nimona that are not, like, explicitly, like, oh, that character's autistic, unless you're, like, really familiar with what it's like. I think the portrayal of Josh is fine. I think that he serves his purpose narratively. But if you want another good example of how to deal with autism, then, I mean, I put him in the thumbnail for a reason. I think I'm not going to talk about him, especially considering that he was also, interestingly enough, another character Limas talked about. I'm not going to spend too much time on Wrench, because again, like, the video is about Josh. But I want to highlight him as, like, an example on how I would prefer autism be held with certain characters. And wouldn't you know it, it wasn't explicitly done that way. He's just a quirky character, and they think that's funny, but it could also, like, kind of work that way, too. So, yeah. Examples that were given was his difficulty with reading the room. Like, he just does not pick up on social cues. I think he, from what I could tell, I think he picks up on it worse than Josh, interestingly enough. Also has very similar difficulties when it comes to emotional regulation. He has his own special interest, that being in robotics. And he is an engineer and mechanical repair specialist. I'm gonna just chalk that up with the robotics. It's not hard to be able to take a character and go, yeah, that could pass off as autistic. With Josh, I might be a little out of line for saying this, I think they try-harded a bit too much. It's a weird balancing act because, again, how do you serve the narrative and make it explicit, but also act as positive representation? Like, don't get me wrong, I would still call it positive representation. I just think there's room for improvement. God, I hope that makes sense. I feel like I just kind of said shit. But, yeah, what do you think? Have you played this game? Do you think he is a good example of positive representation? Do you think Wrench works that way? Let me know in the comments. Again, thank you, Limus, for making that video. You made my life so much fucking easier. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I want to make that clear. This is just me using them as a resource and taking their word for it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know who else you would like me to, like, cover in this series, and I will consider it. But yeah, otherwise, that should be it. And until next time, hack the system! Down with oppression! Some other third thing! This shit is way too small.